Well, let's talk to journalist and Middle East expert Emily Schrader, who joins us now. Good morning to you, Emily.
Hi, great to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, what did you make of this post on Truth Social talking about this beautiful armada, which we know is fleet heading towards, well, closer to Iran from the Southern Ocean and this threat to attack?
Well, you know, we've seen a lot of rhetoric from Donald Trump, as we usually do. We've seen him call for support for protesters, encourage them to continue to go to the streets. And unfortunately, there's been well over a week since he made that threat. And we have seen since then tens of thousands of Iranians who were slaughtered in the streets. Now, I'm pleased to see that the White House has continued to maintain the position that there is no strike that's off the table. They've continued to send assets to the Middle East. And I think that the statements of President Trump are a positive thing when it comes to the mullahs. We know that they are going to continue these executions. They have not stopped. And that pressure needs to continue to be applied. Now, it not only needs to be applied, it needs to be implemented. And I think that's the problem that a lot of Iranians are having now. I mean, they're literally begging in the streets for President Trump to intervene.
Well, that's it. He said, and this is the thing, there are two different things, aren't there? There's the nuclear threat and the saber rattling from the Iranian regime against Israel and our allies in the Middle East, the funding of terrorism abroad, and the threats to, blatant open threats to destroy America. And we're the little Satan, of course, alongside, I can never remember, we're the little or the medium-sized Satan, whether it's Israel or us, depending on the latest rhetoric. That's very different from the threat that Iran poses to its own people, the young people who've been on the streets, and the tens of thousands who've been on the streets. How does this armada of warships help them when the president said, go out on the streets, we will not allow protesters to be killed en masse by this regime, we will help. And then help came there none.
Well, I think they actually are the same thing at the end of the day, because the problem here isn't just the nuclear threat. Of course, that is one of the threats, but we're talking about a regime that for 47 years has maintained a genocidal position, not only towards the state of Israel, but towards the entire West. That is the entire foundation upon which the Islamic Republic of Iran is founded. And so when we're talking about U.S. action against the Islamic Republic, it's not just about the nuclear issue. It's also about the ballistic missile buildup that they have been carrying out just since June even. It's about their sanctions evasions through China and through other nations like Russia. It's about their illicit weapons trade. It's about their support for terror proxies that have killed countless troops, U.S. troops even, in the Middle East. It's about the Houthis, who have disrupted global shipping, another proxy of the Islamic Republic. They are a global source of instability. And that is the reason that the United States is threatening to carry out action against the Islamic Republic, but also the reason that they should.
Well, I was just going to say, Republic. I mean, you can't make threats. Iran's making such blatant open threats to, death to America, Israel. I mean, sorry, you don't get to say that and not face consequences. But here's the thing. The president claimed, last year, we've dealt with that nuclear threat, those big, beautiful bombs that went into that nuclear facility in the mountains. That's all dealt with. And now he's saying about we need to deal with that nuclear capability. Did he or did he not deal with that at the time?
I think he dealt with it for the time, but in the long term, we knew, at least in Israel, we knew that this was going to continue to be a problem. Not only the proxy issue, the terror support, but also the nuclear program, because remember, they had approximately 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that they had already stored, that they had already moved, and we haven't received answers. The IAEA has demanded also updates on what the status is of that, where that is physically, and of course, the Islamic Republic is being evasive on that, because that's what they do when it comes to this nuclear program.
Here's the issue for a lot of people, which is, and I know we know a lot of American people, and I think a lot of people in Britain as well, will just say, look, Iran's a problem. We don't like this regime. It's killing people. It's making threats against our allies, etc., funding terrorism, all of that. But what's the alternative? If you get rid of them, what do you get in return? And we've seen what happens in Iraq. We've seen what's happened in Afghanistan. We didn't get involved in Syria. That didn't work out too well. Maybe it is now. We don't know. I think there's a lot still on the table there. But is it, we see what happened in Libya, a completely and utterly lawless state. Would have we been better off to have kept Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and others in power? There's a totally fair argument for the West that we might have been. So, what is the alternative to the Tehran regime?
I think what we're seeing right now for the first time is a united opposition. We've seen more support than ever for the Crown Prince in exile, Reza Pahlavi. That's who they're chanting for in the streets. But further than that, I think from the perspective of the West, Reza Pahlavi is someone who is a pro-Western, pro-democracy figure who has spent much of his life in the West, who is a patriot, who supports and wants better relations with the Western world for the country of Iran, and who wants to see the country truly succeed. Beyond that, he has also been working on a transition plan. We're not talking about someone who wants to come in and have a straight monarchy. We're talking about someone who
like
wants a constitutional monarchy.
There's an awful lot of rose-tinted spectacles about the Shah of Iran, his father, before he was deposed in '79. This was a pretty nasty autocratic regime.
This isn't something that Reza Pahlavi has ever advocated for. Mm-hmm. He's advocated for constitutional monarchy and for the voice of the people to be heard his entire life, not just right now. And that's something I believe the West should take advantage of. They should use this as an opportunity to support a more stabilizing force in Iran. We also have to remember that Iran's history isn't the same as the Arab world, Libya, Iraq, any of those situations. This is a people who had a very modern society prior to '79 and who have demonstrated perhaps more than any other single group of people in the world that they do not want this regime. How many people have to die before the West is going to stop propping up the Islamic Republic of Iran?
that is the thing. In terms, just finally to leave it on that. I mean, again, we shouldn't. This is a major issue for an awful lot of people. Well, I mean, apparently not those who protest on the streets about someone dying in Gaza, but they're not that bothered, it turns out, about people dying on the streets of Tehran. Not an issue for them. Remarkably quiet. Fallen under something heavy, can't reach their phones like Greta and others. But no flotillas, interestingly. In terms of the numbers we've got, I mean, we've got some figures that are coming out, 12,000, 20,000, was it 30,000? Was that just over a couple of days, 8th and 9th of January? Do we have any real idea? Because we know that Israel certainly has had extraordinary intelligence of what is going on. I mean, in terms of the attacks they've launched on Israel and the help on Iran and the help they've given the Americans, their tentacles are extraordinary. Good in Iran. What sort of numbers are we talking about in terms of the actual people who've been slaughtered on the streets, those who've been executed subsequently, those who were injured, and those who are imprisoned?
So we have seen a varying number of reports. We were looking at 12,000 was the most credible that was reported. I've heard from every single person that I've spoken to on the ground, from witnesses, people who took part in protests, individuals who were injured, as well as medical staff that I spoke to. All of them have said the numbers are significantly higher than anything that's been reported, even those higher numbers that were in the range of 30 to 40,000, the most recent that we've seen. We've also seen credible reports come from several different news sources just in recent days, citing more than 30,000 casualties. I think it's likely that the number is somewhere between 30 and 50. But again, I'm still hearing from sources on the ground that I'm speaking to, they believe it's much higher. And in terms of who was on the streets, we're talking about millions of Iranians. Yeah. So this is a massive number, and I'm not sure we'll ever know because they cut off the internet for more than 20 days. And even now, it's only being restored sporadically and through certain individual users.
And they are listening in. I know people who've got family in Iran, and they're very, very clear. They can hear the clicks and in automated voices that absolutely it is not safe to have a conversation with someone in Iran at this current time for their own safety.
Yes, absolutely. It's a dire situation with the internet and not just the internet, but the entire situation for the people of Iran who are really being effectively held hostage by the Islamic Republic.
One of the things I find absolutely extraordinary is the defense of the mainstream media here. BBC, they've got literally, Iran, Persia. They've actually got people, who got expertise, and they didn't cover these protests, didn't cover these deaths, massively obsessed with a couple of people being shot in Minnesota, not so bothered about 30 to 50,000 people being executed on their streets as pro-democracy activists in Iran. But their arguments was, look, we haven't got people on the ground and it's very difficult to get the figures, and we can't verify these figures. But they've been happily for the last few years taking the figures of the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza as absolute, gospel from God every single time in the middle of a war zone, and those figures down to the last dozen people, absolutely 100% factually treating those as true. But apparently in Iran, completely different.
Well, I think, again, we're seeing the utter hypocrisy from the BBC, which is also dubbed Ayatollah BBC by many Iranians, for their long-standing support for Khomeini at the time, at the beginning, during the Islamic Revolution, and now Khamenei. So this is not surprising at all. We know that the BBC has a clear bias when it comes to this issue. We're not sure why. It's been different people at different times, but it has a tradition that has continued and is continuing now with the revolution in Iran as well. So, we'll see what happens with that, but they're not the only ones. I mean, I saw CNN also did a report from inside Iran spewing the complete talking points of the Islamic Republic itself. Everything is fine here. Nothing's wrong. Things are working well. The internet's great. Like, that's the kind of messaging we're hearing from people who are on the ground reporting in Iran. But you're absolutely right about BBC being laughably absurd with this excuse that they don't have sources on the ground. First of all, they do. I myself have sources on the ground in terms of my reporting. So certainly the BBC does. They just don't want to report what's being heard. And we've seen the same thing, a lot of censorship and a lot of minimization of the person, as I mentioned before, that the Iranians are calling for, which is the crown prince in exile.
Absolutely. Emily Schrader, great to talk to you, Middle East expert journalist. Thank you for that. Philippa